Welcome to episode number 14 of Uncovering Unexplained Mysteries. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good. How about you? Just started back up with school again. I got one more math class left, and then I'm done with my AA transfer degree. So I'm looking forward to being done with this step of my college, technically career so far, because college is kind of a career for me right now. So I don't have a job, so unless this counts, but not really.
Maybe one day it'll count if we ever set up a Patreon, which we were thinking about doing, like offering some additional content, like through the Patreon, like the perks or whatever. I don't know if anyone would be interested in that or not. If you are, let us know. We'll probably still do it anyway down the road because this thing's just like growing and you know, just be a way to give you some extra stuff. If you're really into the podcast, you can kick us some shekels and get some extra stuff for your internet dollars. Anyway, I'm doing pretty good. I've just come off of being sick. I am still sick, but I'm in the sinus drainage part of being sick where it's not like the worst point. It's like you're recovering. Been doing a lot of gigs in my personal life, like a lot of wedding gigs and just Sweet 16s. I did a Sweet 16 party the other day, and it was depressing because it reminded me about how that time in my life was so crappy and how these kids were just so happy and had the whole world ahead of them. And, you know, I'm some 28-year-old DJ at their party going like, yeah, when I was your age, I was fat and nobody wanted to talk to me. So that was kind of...
I mean, you're not alone there. I mean, I didn't go to the prom or any of that. Like, it was just lame and, you know.
We didn't even have the option, though, because I went to a shitty-ass Christian private school, so they didn't have... Their version of prom was so lame that you couldn't even dance with your date. You just sat there and ate. There was no dances. There was no nothing.
And then they just played, like, really bad Christian music.
I don't even think they played
Christian rock.
I don't think they played any music. It was literally like a 30-minute event. It was so lame.
But that is lame.
Yeah. So, like, whenever I go and DJ these parties, you know, like these proms and stuff, it really is, it brings me back to, like, kind of a sad point in my life where it's like, wow, I didn't get to experience any of this, and look how much fun these kids are having.
Well, you know, it's just one moment. I mean, it's... How I look at it is, yeah, they could have had fun that one night, but it's not like it's a life-changing moment for these kids.
Yeah, and that's why I shortly get over it soon after the gig, but, like, while I'm there, I'm just kind of, like, and the rest of that night, I'm just kind of lamenting, you know, but, I mean, I'm happy I got the work, I'm happy I am getting these parties, a hell of a lot better than working some 9-to-5 bullshit, you know, job. You know, I'll deal with my inner sad boy, you know, rather than work at a cubicle.
Yeah, I mean... You're doing really well. I mean, for me personally, I just won't take any job right now. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, shit, you know, gives you more. Dude, if I didn't have these jobs, God, I'd be able to work on my YouTube channel so much more, which would be great, because my YouTube channel's been very sleepy lately because I've been so fucking busy. This podcast is a priority to me, though, just because so many people like it, so I'm always going to make time for this, but, yeah, all my other stuff has been suffering, like, big time.
Yeah.
So, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this shit. The first segment that we're going to be talking about is off the Ultimate Collection on the Bizarre Murders. It's called Burned Evidence. This was a request, but this is one that also I wanted to talk about at some point, but when the person requested it, it kind of jogged my memory. Now, this is basically, this is a murder case, but what's kind of unique about this one is there are 3 very colorful characters who are all suspects in this murder, and you got the sheriff, you got the best friend, and you got the business consultant, and all 3 of them, it's almost like a game of Clue or something. It's almost like, you know, they're all saying that they didn't do it, and they're accusing the other one of doing it, and they all have their various reasons, and this is like a real life thing that happened, so it's pretty interesting. Like, that's what makes this case particularly interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll dive into it here. So the segment starts off by saying Eric Tamiyasu and Diana Anderson had known each other for years, but this night was their first date. Eric was an attentive host, and the date seemed to be going well. Around 11 p.m., though, the couple started being harassed by bizarre tapping sounds and knockings at their door, or at Eric's door.
It's like the whackers, the people who were whacking the whackers all over again.
Yeah, kind of. But these guys weren't as good as the people who terrorized the whackers, because footsteps could be heard running away from the door and all that. And then I'll get to much later on in this segment, a shoe print was actually found in their yard. So yeah, they were being harassed, like, strangely, and Diana was quoted by saying, it was not funny, especially at that time of night when I was having to get in my car and drive home. Now, see, Diana is what I call a good shit, because Diana is not expecting to spend the night at Eric's house. She hangs out and then leaves. That's just a good practice.
Exactly.
Ladies, don't spend the night at the house
on the first date.
Yeah, and linger, take the money and run, man. Like sleep in your own bed that night. Just wait for a
take it on the run, baby.
Oh, that's another.
That's the way you want it, baby.
It's another song about running. I was thinking about the Steve Miller song. Go on, take the money and run. But that would be the last time that Eric was seen alive when Diane left that night. Ooh. Eric's home was located in a remote area outside of a town by a fruit orchard that he owned and operated. It was like his business.
Hood River, Oregon.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the cases we're going to be talking about are like right in your backyard again, Mike.
Yeah,
so I'm going to be pestering you about details.
I've been to Hood River. The one thing I remember the most is me and my parents. We went to a bar and grill because it was late at night. It was the only place that was open for food, and we ordered some calamari. But they did not mention that this was fire hot calamari. And there was like jalapenos, like just tons of them with the calamari, with the seeds and everything. And there was nothing on the menu that said super spicy, calamari. It just said calamari. So there was no other place to eat. So we just had to soldier through. It was very... I was hungry, but at the same time, it's like one of those things where it just burns so much and it's so uncomfortable and so painful that it's just like I'd be fine if I just fasted for the rest of
this whole time I'm trying to think of like some kind of mysterious like tint I can put on that story or some mysterious angle. I just got nothing. Mike and the mystery of the calamari in Hood River, Oregon. What?
Well, the mystery is why they didn't label the calamari as being spicy.
Oh my god! I don't. What the fuck? We're talking about a murder story, and you're going into this calamari. I was expecting a better Hood River account here that you personally had, but all it was spicy calamari. But no, you actually do have a story about this that we're going to get into.
Yes, I do. So I'll make up for that.
I'll make up for that one. So yeah, this guy owned a fruit orchard and he operated and all. And a week after Eric's date with Diana, Don Dixon, a friend and business consultant to Eric, drove out to check on him because for several days, Don was having to field phone calls from other friends asking about where's Eric, why, we've been trying to reach him. So Don entered through the back of Eric's house with a key that Eric had given him. And as soon as he walked in, he was greeted by a strong odor. According to Don, this was an odor that he had never smelled before. He was hoping that it was just the trash that hadn't been taken out. But
wishful thinking.
Yeah, wishful thinking to say the least. As Don called out for Eric, he got no response. So he then eventually headed up to the master bedroom, and they found the body of Eric Tamiyasu in his bed. Quote, "There's no question in my mind that he was dead, so I said a prayer, went downstairs, and called 911 and asked for assistance." Now,
so speaking of Don,
right, this is what we're...
Don Dixon, there's the story that, I was going to talk about and that Josh is mentioning. My mom, for many years, she was a phlebotomist. and a phlebotomist is basically the person who draws your blood.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So my mom actually drew this guy's blood, which is really crazy because we were watching this segment together, and my mom's like, "I know that guy. I drew his blood." So my mom knows one of the suspects. Like, doesn't know him really well,
but had a personal encounter.
Yeah, a personal encounter with someone who was featured on Unsolved Mysteries,
which is pretty cool, I think. Especially if the segment made it to the Ultimate Collection box set and is a higher kind of profile. Well, not a high profile case per se, but it was good enough that they put it on the box set. So I mean, that's pretty cool, I think. And you all hopefully think that too. It's certainly much cooler than the spicy calamari that Mike had in Hood River, Oregon.
Definitely a lot cooler than that.
But this guy Don, though, like, he's so wormy. He's like this little dweeb. Like, that's the word I would use to describe him. He's a little dweeb. He's very wormy, and I don't trust him very much. But then again, I don't really trust any of these guys a whole hell of a lot. So the investigators from the sheriff's department quickly arrived on the scene. They decided at that current moment that it was an unattended death. Now, whether it was a medical problem or a heart attack, they didn't know, but they said that there was no indication of foul play. Now, at the time of his death, Eric didn't seem to have an enemy in the world, but an autopsy would reveal that he had 3 gunshot wounds to his head. The incredible level of decomposition disguised the true nature of his death. Now, think about that. Like, it's pretty intense. I mean, I guess the guy would have been dead for within the border of a week's time.
At least a few days.
Yeah, at least a few days. I mean, that's crazy, man, that, like, the body would decompose that fast to where you... But then again, though, if you ever watch those, like, murder mystery shows, like bullet wounds to the head are kind of difficult to see, even if it's a fresh body, because, you have all that hair on your head that usually, like, kind of covers the wounds as well, so that might be another...
Unless you have really short hair, then...
Yeah. So that disguised the nature of his death. Who killed Eric Tamiyasu? The investigation has focused on 3 potential suspects who have all participated to be interviewed in this segment, whatever. One of the suspects happens to be the sheriff involved in the case. As Eric's body was being removed from its house, Sheriff Joe Wapner approached Don Dixon with a strange request. He said, quote, this is Don quoting the sheriff, I believe. He said, we've looked for a gun, we've looked for bullets. To spare the family any discomfort or trauma, we're going to bring the bed out and we want you to burn it, end quote. That's what Don said that the sheriff said.
That is so bizarre. That is one of the main things about this case that just makes me really shake my head. I'm like, I don't get that.
I mean,
the family grief and discomfort, we're going to bring the bedding out, we want you to burn it. That's evidence.
Right.
The family isn't going to see the bedding or in the first place. What? Are you going to put the bedding on display at the funeral? I mean, what the fuck?
I mean, I don't know, like, after everything's all said and done, I mean, I don't exactly know how, like, crime scene investigators, I don't know how they...
evidence.
They probably would have taken it with them. I mean, that to me just, like, reeks of sloppy police work 101 or corrupt police work 101, whichever 101 you want to take, whichever class you want to take on
someone's being lazy and sloppy, or someone is trying to cover something up.
Right. But, Don, being the kind of wormy guy he is, he didn't really question it. He just kind of followed orders. Yeah, I would have too.
Like, I'm not burning this. If you want to burn evidence, then you burn the evidence.
Well, then too, it's like, he said, we're gonna take the bedding outside and we want you to burn it. And like, my first question would be like, well, why am I in charge of that?
Yeah.
So the next day, Don did exactly what the sheriff ordered him to. He lit it on fire and and burned the bed, and nothing remained but a metal frame and a pile of ashes. The coroner was surprised to find 3 small caliber bullets, though, were lodged in Eric's head. Investigators had a homicide on their hands at that point, obviously. Now, you could say suicide at first, and that was actually Don's theory because Eric had been depressed or whatever. But 3 bullet wounds to the back of the head, yeah, that's a homicide, because unless you're holding a semi-automatic to your head, you're not getting more than one in there.
3 bullets in the head is a typical sort of contract, hit, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, just to make sure the job's done.
Yeah.
Because of the decision to burn the bed, valuable clues had been lost, and quote, based on
exactly.
And this is the sheriff, and I gotta try to impersonate this guy's voice because he has such a weird, like, doofus kind of sounding voice. Every single person in this segment is kind of a doofus in their own way. He was quoted as saying, "Based on the fact that this wasn't going to be a homicide investigation, due to the lack of evidence, it was my decision to burn the bed. The family, they just might appreciate not having to view the horrific things that were left behind."
I know, yeah.
They just might appreciate it.
Yeah, this is the whole quote, the direct quote. He's like, based on the lack of evidence, this is going to turn into a criminal case. It was my decision to burn the bed. It was my decision at the time because the family, they might just actually appreciate not having to go through the trauma of viewing the horrid things that we were left behind. And yes, I sound like Dr. Phil.
You're responsible for your own unhappiness. But the sheriff could have had darker intentions. Don Dixon, who seems to be kind of the caveat in this whole thing, or the kind of main centerpiece, he mentions a conversation that he had with Eric before his death about Eric talking about some Polynesian woman he had been seeing who was older. And according to Don, the rumor mill was that the sheriff's wife is Polynesian and older than Eric.
Yeah, that's just a bunch of
hearsay,
conjecture, and just rumor.
Then the sheriff comes in again. I've heard that my wife was having an affair with Eric. So in retaliation, I went up to Eric's room, shot him, and even went through the trouble of burning all the evidence. If that's what they think, they're looking in the wrong direction.
He was just so matter-of-fact about it. He was kind of defensive about it.
Yeah, he was kind of defensive. Yeah, he had an attitude.
Yeah.
He had an attitude problem, it seemed like. Seemed like this guy...
If I had nothing to do with it, I'd just be like, I've heard all this stuff. I didn't do anything. Don Dixon seemed a little bit more with the way that he, was responding to the accusations and stuff like that. As well as his other friend, Eric's other friend. The one that was really defensive was a sheriff.
Yeah. So now we get into Eric's longtime friend, who's also named Eric, so this is just going to get confusing. His last name's Smith, Eric Smith. So I'll just call him, I guess, Smith or something. He's seen as suspect number 2. Don, yet again, old Donnie boy, being the main factor in all these stories. Don was walking by, I guess, the office that they were in or something one time, and overheard Eric and his other friend, or Eric, both Erics, were having a heated argument about some money that had been invested into some business that the two men ran together, and how Eric needed that money for his failing orchard business, and how he felt like Eric Smith was either, not managing it properly or something like that. And when Dixon approached Eric after the argument, all Eric had to say, he was clearly upset, and he said, "That son of a bitch," referring to Eric Smith, his friend that he was, in that business with. Then he got into his car, and those were the last words that he heard from Eric Tamiyasu, Don Dixon. That was the last words that Don Dixon heard from Eric.
Well, he's pretty defensive here too, Eric Smith. I forgot about this one where he's all like, I can tell you flat out for a fact, Eric and I did not have an argument. Eric didn't owe me money. I didn't owe him money. Don lives in a fantasy world.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I really didn't get the sense that. I think Eric Smith was the least offensive amongst the three of them. He's just kind of I've never been up there. He's what I would imagine your typical Pacific Northwest hippie, long hair and a ponytail, just kind of,
Yeah, hipster.
Yeah, like one of the OG hipsters, just like, I didn't know him money, he didn't know me money. Dawn lives in a fantasy world.
Yeah.
So the police believe that the amount of money that was actually invested into this business was far less than what Don Dixon has been claiming.
Like he said, like $50,000 to $60,000 or whatever.
When in actuality, it was only $15,000 that each one of them had invested. Yeah. The business, the used car business, which is the business that they were, investing in, it eventually flopped. Whatever. So now we get into potential suspect number 3, which is the man who discovered the body, Mr. Squiggle Worm himself, Don Dixon, a.k.a. the guy who once got blood drawn by Mike's mom. Many people don't think Eric was as close to Don Dixon as Don claims he was.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. Like the one where it's like, no one, people Eric's friends didn't even know who this guy was.
Yeah, Eric Smith said, quote, "What Eric told me was that Don is someone that he bought spray from, period. If you talk to Eric's friends, most of them don't even know who Don is." Which, that's neither here nor there with me. I mean, the fact that, I have, like you, Mike, for example. I know. Like, none of my friends know who you are. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't make you any more or less guilty of anything.
Exactly.
Although I do think you're hiding a lot of secrets about Bigfoot over there up in the Pacific Northwest, but that's another story. So it was Don Dixon, though, who notified Eric's sister, Ramona, who's hot, by the way, of Eric's death minutes after he found the body. And he said, quote, "It didn't look like there was any foul play, didn't appear to be any exit wounds." And then Ramona, Eric's sister, was just like, "What? Why would there be gunshot wounds? What are you talking about? Like, what do you even, like, exit wounds? Why are you even mentioning this, basically?"
Yeah, I could see why Don said what he did.
I could, too.
Like, I don't really get why she thinks that's suspicious.
I get why she does, but I also get why he said what he said. I get both sides.
I guess you could, but I mean, if you were involved in something, who the hell would call and say, like, yeah, doesn't appear that there are any exit wounds, and there was no foul play.
Yeah, but you got to look at the kind of guy that Don was. He's an intellectual type. He seems to be more of exactly. More of your nerdier kind of guy. So
if he was involved in the crime, I don't think he would say anything about it. I highly doubt it.
Yeah, that's true. He probably wouldn't be throwing around terms like, "Oh, I don't see any exit wounds." This is just a nerdy guy who maybe watched a little too many crime shows back at that time.
And he watched Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, watching too many Unsolved Mysteries, and he's like, "I don't, anybody who watches CSI or anything like that, if they were to find a body, they might drop some terminologies like that. Hell, I watched a lot of Investigation Discovery back in the day, and when
Yeah.
And I learned about the term malingering, which is a courtroom term that basically means someone's faking it. And so when I got into my car accident, and I was talking to the insurance representative, I was describing something about the lady who hit me, and I said, no, she's malingering. And then, like, after the call, I felt like such a douche because I'm like, you Mr. Lawyer over here throwing around your big investigation discovery terms, throwing around malingering like you're some big shot. Like, I'm very hard on myself, folks. I felt like a douche, though, for saying, like, it's like, wow, that's one of those cases where using big words just makes you sound like a douchebag. Rather than putting it simply to where, in a way that everyone would understand, you're wanting to sound like you're smarter than everybody else. And I guess I was kind of doing that in that particular sense, but I felt like if I use big words, maybe they think they take me more like legit, on the phone. Whatever, I still got
that
the
is
check.
If they know what it means.
Yeah, right. Which she's like, malingering. I only get paid $8.50 to sit here and take people's calls for this insurance company.
I just got people from my insurance company trying to trick me, trying to call me later and say, "Oh, we lost your phone conversation where you talked about the accident," and then I'm like, "No, I don't buy that at all."
Oh, that
And
happened
no,
to
I
you?
didn't. And then they later called back. Then they were like, "Yeah, we found it." I'm like, "Yeah, all right, thank you."
Like it's just a file that's on the ground or something, like an audio file that's just sitting on the ground or something. Like, oh, here's that phone conversation. Found it.
It was such a total. They're trying to get me to say something that's conflicting.
Yeah, get you to contradict yourself.
Yeah.
Eric's or Don Dixon's response to the whole exit wound comment, he was like, well, when I first discovered the body, I looked closely to see if there were any gunshot wounds. I thought a logical reason why Eric was dead was suicide. Eric had been really depressed. So, he closely examined the body to look for gunshot wounds, which kind of goes into why I understand why he made that comment to the sister.
Exactly.
Because I mean, if someone's laying dead in bed, look, Eric was a young guy. He looked like he was in good health from the pictures that they showed. He doesn't exactly look like the kind of guy that would just be lying dead in a bed for no reason,
But sometimes that happens.
Sometimes it happens.
There are people who are in peak health condition. They're in their peak prime condition, and they just have a brain aneurysm or a heart attack or something. It's just very,
very rare.
Very rare, but it happens.
So, police theorize that the killer not only knew the layout of the home, but also the remote location of the home. The murder weapon was a small caliber handgun, and it was never found. And one final twist, what I mentioned earlier, Diane Anderson, the chick who was on the date with Eric that one night, that was saying how they did find that single unexplained shoe print outside of Eric's house, which would have definitely been a clue, but heavy rains in the following days of their date washed away any evidence made that night, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Kind of the last words of each person on here I wrote down. The sheriff said, all his closing words was, "I did not have anything to do with the death of Eric Tamiyasu." And then his friend Eric Smith said, "Eric was my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding. He was like my brother." So obviously that's him saying that he didn't do it. And then Don is the last guy. He says, "I have no way of knowing who was involved in Eric Tamiyasu's death. The only ones that I know that didn't do it was myself and my wife. Everyone else is suspect." And so there you have it. I mean, that's kind of the case.
I guess in the meantime, all the suspects in the case, they passed polygraph tests arranged by the Hood River County Sheriff Department, except for one, Don Dixon.
Ooh.
Dixon eventually took an independently administered polygraph. The Sheriff's Department says the results were inconclusive. Once again, polygraph tests aren't the end-all, be-all.
No, not
but in the meantime, someone in Hood River has gotten away with murder.
Which, yeah, I'm sure all of you have Robert Stack's voice in your head at this point. He'll deliver it better than we ever could. The interesting thing about polygraphs are they're more of a psychological tool used by police than anything else. They're not even admissible in court as evidence, first of all.
No, not anymore.
Oh, they were at one point?
I would probably say they probably were at one point, like when they were first invented, but probably not anymore.
Oh, I know for a fact that they're not anymore. You cannot use.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't use the results of a polygraph for any. It's an investigative tool to get in someone's head or to see. It's really to see how they react from upon them first asking if would you be willing to take one, and how does the suspect react to that question? Are they open to taking it? Are they reluctant, as you'll see later on with this other case we're about to cover? So that's kind of a big reason they use it. It's just a tool. It doesn't really prove anything one way or the other. But I will say though, if the polygraph turns out, if they pass the polygraph test, then police tend to not look at them as much as a subject as they would if they fail it. But it's not damning by any means.
When it comes to this case, first off, I look at the whole thing. I'm like, where's the motive? I don't know what Don's motive would be. It doesn't seem like they even talked about a potential motive for Don. The other people seems like a bunch of hearsay. The sheriff is kind of fishy, but then all we really have is just this rumor mill stuff from Don. So I don't know, really. I think this is just there's not enough evidence here for me to make a conclusion on, I think this person did it. There really isn't enough there for me personally. But if Don did do it, him saying he didn't do it doesn't mean anything. Because as we know, in multiple segments of Unsolved Mysteries, there are people who sit there with a straight face right in front of the camera, like that guy who lost his little girl.
Yeah. It was his son, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was his son, not a little girl, but it was his son. And he said, "Oh, blah blah blah, I didn't do it," da 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 da, and then find out, well, no, he did.
But it was it was an accident though, and
he hit him though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're talking about a case that nobody knows about except for us two.
Exactly, but it was a very, I thought it was a very interesting, somewhat memorable case.
It was also
shocking. The update was. Yeah. It was just like, what?
It also reminded me of the Backyard Bones case, which is on the Ultimate collection under Bizarre Murders, where Monica Rizzo disappeared, and there's this anonymous phone. This is a great case, actually. We need to talk about this one. There's an anonymous phone call to the police department saying that her bones were in the backyard of the husband's house. And so police went and investigated the guy's backyard, and they found like all these bones from all these different bodies in his backyard, and some of them were finely chipped up like from a wood chipper, and some were like normal, and some still had some greasy film on there like they were new. And all the husband had to say was, "I don't know how those bones got back there. I never rented a wood chipper. I don't know where my wife was." And there was like just all this sketchy shit. Like
why does he sound like Richard Nixon?
I am not a crook. Because that's how he talked. His voice annoyed me. But yeah, dude, and they actually have a commentary on this on the Ultimate Collection, where some of the writers for the show like did a commentary. The commentaries are notoriously sparse on the Ultimate Collection. The segments that do have commentaries, they're very. I guess the people giving the commentaries like haven't done commentaries on things very much because they weren't super great at it. A lot of times they would talk for like the first 2 or 3 minutes of the segment, and then they'd be like, "Well, we'll just let you guys enjoy the rest of this segment. We'll stop talking now." And it's like, no, this is the audio commentary part. Like, this is why we're here, to hear people from the show give us some behind the scenes. But on that particular one, the writers of the show were like, "This guy is so guilty. It was so obvious when we were doing the show." He's like, "This guy just reeked of guilt," and blah blah blah. That's a really good segment. It's called Backyard Bones. I don't know what season it's on, but we'll have to talk about that at some point. But yeah, I kind of forgot how I even got on that topic, to be honest with you.
Because I thought you were talking about people who sounded like they were innocent, but in reality they weren't.
Oh yeah, right. So yeah, that's Don Dixon. That could be anyone on here. They all sound innocent. And as far as who did it, I mean, someone did it. It was obviously some kind of a contract killing or revenge killing or something. Somebody did it. Somebody murdered him. He did not kill himself. They never really mentioned anything about fingerprints or anything like that in the show, so I'm guessing they didn't find anything. And again, the bed was burned the day after his body was discovered, so as far as anything that might have been on the bed, that's gone. If I had a gun held to my head and someone said, "Pick which one you think out of the 3," and those are the only choices I had, I would probably go with... Okay, so let's just look at this for a second. He did say he was seeing a Polynesian woman who was older than him. The sheriff said the sheriff didn't deny that his wife was Polynesian and older than Eric. And all he had to say in his defense was, "My wife did not mess around with Eric Tamiyasu, blah, 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 blah." How does he know that?
Yeah.
How does he know that?
Yeah.
So
that's the one if I had to pick two, I'd probably go with the sheriff. And the main reason why is because of the whole... The red flag is the burning the bed thing.
And he's the only one with a clear enough motive, a revenge thing, I mean, Hood River, whatever the fuck the name of the town is, it seems like a small enough town to where some, a small town sheriff might think that he could get away with something like that. And that is a very small town thing to do, like burning the bed. Like could you see like the LAPD or someone,
No.
yeah, like having something like even the
Jacksonville.
yeah, even the
Jacksonville.
JSO, like our sheriff department here, like you would never you would never hear about that on the news. Like that would never fly. Like the sheriff like having the person burn that would never happen. Now in a small town where everyone knows everyone's name, nah, I could see that being more of a possibility. Like, hey, the good old boy network, I want to bump off this guy who's been
Like
bumping my wife.
Murders. Exactly.
Yeah, so I'd have to go with the sheriff, honestly. I mean, for the burning of the bed and the fact that his wife... I mean, how many... what is our Polynesian population in the United States, even? Like, what are the... There's a huge Polynesian community in that particular town. I mean, like... It's kind of like one of those things that stick out to me, like... I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go with the sheriff. So the sheriff did it. Me and Mike have concluded. We've passed judgment, and we're persecuting him, convicting him. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but yeah. And we're totally not going to get sued for libel or anything.
Instead of I shot the sheriff,
yeah,
it's the sheriff shot.
I got shot by the sheriff because I was fucking his wife on the side. All right, well, that's pretty much all I have to say about that one. It's a great case. Like I said, very Clue-esque, or, just a classic whodunit.
I have to say this, though. I would say the editing in this particular segment was not up to par with the earlier segments. You could tell this was a later episode or later segment from, one of the last few seasons of the show.
Really?
And it had like this kind of just freeze frame stuff, and they were just messing around with the photo editor, and I don't know.
Where they kind of like juxtaposed all three pictures of the suspects right next to each other and all that.
Yeah, or they just there's slow motion in some of the reenactments while they're talking, and it was it reminded me a bit of the remake, the reboot.
Don't say that word on this podcast.
But it wasn't as bad, but it was the same kind of flashy editing. That wasn't as bad, but it was definitely not as traditional and old-fashioned in terms of the editing, like, the earlier segments were. It didn't have
that dark, looming kind of old VHS tape quality to it.
The score also was almost non-existent. And
yeah, that's true. This one was lacking in music.
And the directing on some of the reenactments, it just looked cheaper than the other older shows to me.
But to me, I know we always talk about how the music all plays such a big part in the show and all the elements work together, but to me it was still just as enjoyable just based off of the story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying I felt like it could have been better in that regard.
If Robert Stack could do a narration over me taking a dump, and I would still find it 100 times more interesting than if that narration wasn't there. So I guess it's just my love for how he narrates and how he does voiceovers. He was a great actor before he ever did Unsolved Mysteries.
I'm not saying this is bad. It's just I wouldn't. There are the earlier episodes, from the first few seasons. I just think are stronger in terms of how they're. The cinematography and the editing and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to be biased, I guess, because, like, I've been watching this Ultimate Collection for almost the past 10 years now, way before I discovered the treasure trove that I have. So I'm always going to be, I guess, more particular to any segment that's on the Ultimate Collection, because I've just literally seen them so many times over and over. Speaking of that, we're moving on to another from the Ultimate Collection. This actually, Mike brought up a good point earlier that I never really thought about it until he brought it up. This is called The Blob on the UFO segments of the Ultimate Collection. Now, with a name like The Blob, you'd think, well, this fits perfectly on the UFO disc, but it actually doesn't, because there's no mention about unidentified flying objects at all. Nothing about aliens. I guess this is an alien substance in the sense that alien just means like different or from, unknown origin.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one they kind of shoehorned it into the UFO segments, but I'm glad they did because this is a great segment. Very mysterious.
Yeah, this is one that stood out to me from the first time I saw it. I never even heard of it until I caught it on YouTube back when YouTube still had Unsolved Mystery segments.
So there was actually a time where YouTube had
yes,
like full Unsolved.
They had a lot of segments.
Oh my!
First started out.
I did not know
and
that.
That's why you have a lot of people leave comments saying like, "Man, damn it, like these Unsolved Mysteries, I miss Unsolved Mysteries being on YouTube."
Oh wow!
You can tell that when you go to old articles and then link to YouTube clips that, of course, are no longer there because you press play and then this video has been removed by Terry Cosgrove, by John Cosgrove and Terry Moore.
Yeah, it sounds like a bad science fiction movie. Blobs that rain down from the sky, causing many people in the
like a sequel, like a second sequel to the Blob. Right after Beware of the Blob, there's some, the Reign of the Blob or the Blob Returns or something.
Yeah, the name was I guess this is kind of one of the only things they could have named it, though, because that's exactly what these things were. They rained down from the sky in the Pacific Northwest yet again. In
Oakville, Washington.
Where's that at? Do you know where Oakville's at? Like in real life?
I really don't, because Washington is kind of new to me because I pretty much just only know Vancouver because that's where I've been living for the past few years. I don't know where Oakville is, but from what it sounds like it's somewhere up in maybe, I would say, I don't know if it's in eastern Washington, but I don't know exact area. But it's probably someplace in the mountains, it seems like, because there's not very many people living there. It's raining all the time. It's always cloudy. So it sounds like it's definitely someplace up in the mountains somewhere.
Now, now the whole stereotype of it raining a lot in Washington, would you say that's true for Vancouver as well?
Vancouver is closer to what it's like in Portland. So it does rain a lot, but usually in the fall and the winter. The spring it rains a decent amount. We didn't get a lot of rain we did. But summers are great. You barely get any rain. And springs can be nice because they'll be intermittent, but you'll have nice weather. We rarely ever get days that are over 100 degrees. And sometimes you do, but that doesn't happen very often.
Mm.
So it rains, but you get used to it. I mean, there's people who transplanted from California who are complaining. They'll be like, it rains, it's raining, and bit. I mean, it's just water. I mean, if you got the right... I used to be like, I don't like the rain. And then I moved to Oklahoma with my dad, and then I experienced torrential downpours for hours. And then I'm like, well, the rain over here is nowhere near as bad as that. So
yeah,
I can deal with it.
I sadly have nothing else to compare, only Florida.
It rains there too, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it rains like a motherfucker. This is a tropical climate, something like that.
Yeah, humid as fuck.
Oh yeah, the humidity is just outrageous. You always feel whenever you step outside of from being inside and you step outside, you literally feel like you're stepping into a mouth.
Ugh.
It's just it's bad.
I mean, humid. I'll take dry heat any day over humid heat.
I don't even know if I know what dry heat feels like, to be honest with you. I really don't. People use that.
I dealt with humidity in Oklahoma City, and it was just so bad, and we didn't have any air conditioning, and so I could have a fan on, and I could be butt naked in my birthday suit, and still hot.
Yeah.
Just still sweating, just still miserable.
Oh, as we're talking right now, I'm sitting in my boxers in my computer chair because, just sitting in this chair in my room right now, I will get sweaty. So, yeah, exactly. I try to disrobe. So that's a sexy thought for any of you guys listening to podcasts.
So humid heat is nasty.
I think this is getting a little too erotic for most listeners. So let's get back to the story here. So the blobs that rained down from the sky, it caused many people in the Pacific Northwest to become very ill and small animals and pets to die. On August 7th, 1994, in Oakville, Washington, at 3 a.m. is when this first occurred. Rain began to fall, blanketing a 20 square mile area. In Oakville, it rains about 275 days in the year. So when it started raining on that fateful day, or the fateful night, I should say, it was nothing new until people started realizing that it was not water raining down, but rather gelatinous globs of goo. It came down in torrents and brought with it something of a plague. Now, then they they go along and they interview townsfolk, like real, like on the street kind of thing, which was also kind of new for the show. They didn't do that a whole lot. So I feel like this is a later segment as well. Sorry, I'm still getting over sickness here, so got some Hillary Clinton going on here with the clearing of the throat and coughing.
Need a drink?
No, it's just phlegm working its way down my throat there.
Oh, good. So it's Blob.
Yeah, so I hope the Blob is affecting me on the inside as well. I hope no one's eating while they're listening to this, unless you're into that kind of thing, you sicko. So they interviewed townsfolk, and like, a lot of people were saying like, oh, it was horrible, and the one lady said people would get the flu, but it wouldn't be like a normal flu. It'd be like a really hard flu, and instead of lasting 7 to 10 days, it'd last more like 1 to 2 months.
Well, lasted 7 weeks or 2 to 3 months. I mean, that is pretty crazy.
But dude, if I had the flu for any longer than 2 or 3 weeks, I'd probably just take
I normally
myself out.
don't get sick very often, but when I do, I get really sick. And the last time I remember getting the flu like really bad was when I was with my grandmother, and she got this flu, and we don't even know where it came from, and it was so bad that our cats wanted nothing to do with us. Like the cats could sense that we were like really sick, and the cats were like, "Oh no, oh hell no."
Yeah, because cats are usually just so friendly and just come right up to you. That's bizarre that they didn't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
Wah, wah, wah.
That was that sick.
That was me trying to make a joke, by the way. Cats aren't very friendly.
Well, some are.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, my cat, Emily, was very friendly, and she didn't want anything to do with me when I was super sick.
That's actually kind of that's kind of an adorable name for a cat, Emily.
Yeah. Yeah, she's long gone, but, very special cat.
So a local policeman was the first guy who discovered this kind of gooey. The first guy who reported it. Yeah, he was driving.
Officer David Lacey.
There you go. He was the first to report the precipitation. It was 3 a.m. when the downpour began. He was with his civilian friend in the squad car, and they were just driving down the road, and all of a sudden they saw this rain on their windshield, and they turned the wipers on, and it just started smearing instead of like going like sliding off the windshield. It started smearing almost to the point that they couldn't see, and so he thought, this isn't right. We're out in the middle of nowhere. Where is this coming from? Who's doing this? Like, what's doing this?
Yeah, the segment did a great job, with recreating the blob.
Yeah, the goo
down, and the blob all over the goo all over the windshield. I mean, this is one of the most memorable segments to me because it's even more out there because it's one of a kind. There isn't another sort of story like this.
No.
I mean, there's all alien abduction stories, and there's UFO stories, and sightings, and ghosts, and bizarre murders, and Bigfoot stuff, and so on. But there's nothing else like this. It's just a very strange and honestly kind of terrifying story because it's true, and then you have the other connotations with it, which are very disturbing. But yeah, they did a good job. It's just can you imagine driving down the road, on the freeway or something, and there's just this downpour of slimy rain that just
that'd be freaky. That'd be very
can't
freaky.
See, I mean, that's an accident waiting to happen. It's thankfully that happened at night, but even then, that's bad. I mean, because the accident can still happen. It's just there wasn't that many people. Can you imagine that happened during rush hour, like on a busy road?
Anytime that something comes from the sky that's not water, I'm freaking out. Whether it's...
Well, I'm freaking out because I'm thinking of the Blob from 1988, where, scream now while you can still breathe, and this thing comes out of a meteor and eats you and dissolves you alive. Yeah, it covers you up, and then it's got this like acidic substance. It's an acidic substance, so it pretty much just immolates you alive. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen that one. It sounds
It's
pretty.
actually a really good remake. I thought it was a lot better than the original '50s movie.
Well, that's. I mean, the practical effects, I'm sure, were leaps and bounds above the 19.
Oh yeah, the effects by K&B were just fantastic.
Speaking of effects, I mean, don't you agree that like this could have looked really bad, like the Blob stuff?
Oh, absolutely. It could have looked a lot worse than it did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This could have looked really corny. It could have looked really cartoony or cheesy or whatever, but they made it look very realistic.
Or late or mid '90s CG plus.
Oh, thank God they didn't go. They were smart enough to know when not to use the new form of CG that was coming out back then.
Well, they've been using that for like the UFOs and stuff like that.
And they almost exclusively used it for UFOs and ghosts, obviously, apparition kind of stuff. But no, I don't even think because that's. I think to me doing
they use a little bit of the lights and stuff for CG.
The ghosting effect isn't CG. That's just more of a just like.
No, I was talking about like the Western. The one we're talking about with the hotel.
Yeah.
The Western hotel when the lights are flying around. Like
yeah, true. So anyway, going back to the story here, the officer pulled off to a gas station and to clean his windshield, and he put gloves on, thinking with his head there. The substance was mushy, much like Jell-O in your hands. You could squish it through your fingers. Then that later on, the next day there, local resident Dottie Hearn was equally baffled. By the time she stepped out that morning, the storm had ended, but the globs were everywhere. She thought it was hail, but then when she actually handled it, it was like a gelatinous material. By mid-afternoon, Officer Lacey had taken very ill. He felt like he couldn't breathe, and whatever the substance was, he felt like it just made him violently sick. Sicker than he'd ever been before, according to him.
To him, because it was so much, he was so sick to the point where it just totally shut him down.
Yeah.
Which that doesn't happen very often. So most people, when that happens, you're really ill.
And honestly to be affected by it so quickly, that's another very weird. Because
like with the flu, might not get the symptoms until the night of or something. A night later, a day later type deal. I always hate that because it's like you're fine. And then, like, in the middle of the night, you feel like shit.
Yeah.
And you're like, where the fuck did this come from?
Yeah, when your body's supposedly healing itself and restoring itself, that's when like, it hits you full on.
Yeah.
So across town, Dottie, she wasn't faring much better herself. She was starting to feel dizzy, and it started getting increasingly worse. She became increasingly nauseated. Then 1 hour later, her daughter and son found her sprawled out on the bathroom floor, pale, drenched in sweat, extreme vertigo.
That had to have been a very scary sight.
Yeah, yeah.
To see.
Yeah, absolutely. Her vision was blurring. Dottie spent 3 days in the hospital, and they just linked it to a severe inner ear infection.
Yeah, Dottie's daughter, Sunny, she said, about her mom, she said she was cold, drenched with perspiration. I mean, that's really bad. She says, my mom had been vomiting. She had extreme vertigo. She complained that she had difficulty with her vision, and her vision was blurry.
So her daughter was much smarter than probably a lot of people would have been. She actually grabbed a sample of the substance and took it to the hospital, thinking that maybe this was the cause of why
she had the severe inner ear infection, because that's what the doctors diagnosed her with.
Right. So they're looking at, this just came on so fast. Maybe this weird shit outside that's like papered the town with goo. Maybe
it's like mucus, like God sneezed or some shit and just sneezed all this.
Yeah. So the lab tech found the first clue when the substance was analyzed. It contained human white blood cells. But what it was and why it fell from the sky could not be determined. Then the sample was forwarded to the Washington State Department of Health. They found that this was a very uniform structure. Well, it was very uniform, but it had no structure. Not a structure that could be seen visibly. They attempted to isolate bacteria, and they found that it was teeming with 2 different species of bacteria, one of which makes its home in the human digestive system. And as Robert Stack puts, well, not yet, he doesn't say that. So the first theory was that it was human waste from an airliner. Now that would make sense if it contains bacteria from the human digestive system.
White blood cells.
Yeah. So, but they thought it was from an airliner, which would make sense that, maybe they're dumping their shit, literally, on a town, and that would make people sick.
Like, who cares about this small town?
Yeah, was it Oakville? Never heard of it.
More like Shitville.
Bombs away, motherfucker! But that was ruled out because the FAA has very strict regulations that human waste is dyed blue, and this substance was a crystal clear color.
So like Crystal Pepsi clear.
Yes, which I've had recently and it was pretty good. It was just a mindfuck that it was clear instead of dark colored. Blobs rained down in Oakville 6 times over a 3-week period.
That's the one that really makes me like, oh, whoa. It wasn't just once.
Right.
It was 6 different times.
The shit was chilling up in the sky or something. It was just up there, like waiting to fall. Very weird. Dozens took ill from this. Many dogs and cats died, which, that's a lot of people, because, that's just a side note. But, man, that's, your fucking dog dies from that? That'd be fucking horrible.
That's messed up, yeah.
So nearly a year after Dottie Hearn's illness, she took a sample of the blob that she had kept in her freezer, which I think is kind of cool.
Crazy.
But kind of crazy.
Crazy because it could contaminate other stuff in the freezer.
Yeah, you don't know what it is, and that's like excavating like something from King Tut's tomb and like keeping it in your refrigerator. You don't know what kind of like microbacterial.
That's like going to Chernobyl or whatever and keeping.
Yeah, just taking some dirt and putting it in your fucking planter and then eating the tomatoes that it grows. Yeah, not a very smart idea, but that's what she did. She took it and she sent it to a private research lab. They found out that these blobs had a eukaryotic cell, which is a cell that has a definable nucleus and can be found in animals. And that's when Robert Stack gives a brilliant line. Translation, the goo was alive, but how did it make its way into the clouds?
He's like, translation, the goo was alive. But where did it come from?
They had to give Robert Stack a little bit of that 90s, some 90s lines. He
probably loved saying that.
Oh yeah, probably. He loved it so much he says it again in this segment. So perhaps inevitably the finger of suspicion was then pointed at the military.
Skeptics. Here comes skeptic explanation, or just a really ridiculous explanation here.
Yeah, hold on, getting ready here. So this is one of the explanations that was given. That's so corny. So this
explanation is corny.
Yeah, very true. The military was conducting live bombing runs over the sea, and they said perhaps they bombed a school of jellyfish. And then the daughter of Dottie was saying, okay, so basically the jellyfish were thrown up into the air. They floated 50 miles inland, and over a period of 3 weeks, fell 6 times in August 1994. I find that somewhat preposterous. And then the other lady was saying, if that had also, been the case, it would have smelled to high heaven over there.
Exactly.
Which it would have. It's dead animal carcass.
And it's jellyfish, in particular.
There goes a jellyfish. There goes a cuttlefish. Sorry.
Jellyfish in particular are like really... Was that a B-52 song or something?
That was a B-52's reference, yes. Rock Lobster.
Yeah.
Like the last 3 minutes of the song, they like name off all these sea creatures, and like the women singers make
Rock
these...
Lobster!
Yeah. There goes a cuttlefish. It's really weird, but it's cool. So yeah, that obviously, it's kind of a... cool. I don't know cool if the word is the word. It's kind of a neat thought, I guess, that okay, they bombed the jellyfish and that's why it's clear and making people sick.
It just doesn't make any sense that it went up in the air for 50 miles and it floated 50 miles inland into the air and then fell 6 times over a period of 3 weeks. I don't find that just somewhat preposterous. I find that completely preposterous.
The military confirmed the bombings, but they deny any knowledge of the blob. Big fucking surprise. Every day, but then they go back to the man on the street.
This is the one where it gets really disturbing.
Yeah, they go back to the kind of the man on the street thing. They go, and they're interviewing the citizens of Oakville, and they're saying every day bombers, helicopters, all black in color, were flying around all the time during the time of the blobs raining down. There was a lot of testing being done in that area. There was a lot of areas
saying testing has been done before. It sounds like these townsfolk were like, "Oh, this is just normal." Like, there's a lot of, they let off things in the air all the time here. There's testing done all over the place. There's a lot of places you can't go into
because of the testing.
Yeah, or because maybe the military is actually in the town and they can't go into these places because the military is there.
So they're saying maybe some of the citizens were suggesting maybe it's an experiment to see how people react if we get them just a little sick, but there are regulations against that.
With a biological bomb.
Yeah. So then Robert Stack cuts in again. Translation, chemical warfare. I love that shit. He did. They used two Robert Stack. They made him say translation, comma, and then, insert quote. They made him say it twice in one segment. I think that's great.
Yeah.
So
we definitely have some stranger things going on here in this small town of Oakville.
I don't get it. Is that some kind of popular show, or is that some kind of Netflix exclusive? I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, you should watch that show, by the way, people.
I mean, it's the same sort of, like a small town. There's some government shit going on. Something happens. I think it was some testing of some kind.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether it was United States government or some other government, I don't know what it was. I would probably say it's more the United States government. And just because it's against the RAA, I mean, that doesn't mean anything. They probably test a bunch of stuff on unsuspecting towns.
Well, I'm sure it's against regulations to put chemical substances on doorknobs and steering wheels for people who won't shut up about UFOs and give them leukemia. I'm sure that would be against some regulation too, but it still gets done.
Yeah.
As was, reported in the Withville, Kentucky UFO case if you're to believe what the guy on the phone said when he, called the DJ threatening him, saying the government, they'll get you any way they can. They'll, put it on your doorknob. They'll put on, not trying to incite paranoia in anybody out there, but, the government does shit like this. A lot of people thought that Bob Marley, the reggae singer, was given cancer by the government because he was being too much of a voice of opposition towards a lot of the things that had to do with government at the time. So, I mean, there's those conspiracy theorists out there. I mean, this isn't a conspiracy. This actually happened. A substance did rain down, and I mean, again, I got to go to the witnesses. It was people who, small town, wanted no fame or fortune, just kind of reporting what they saw and what happened. Unfortunately, though, all the samples are gone, making further study impossible. So, who knows if one of the samples had survived to modern day, maybe we could find out more information about it. But given the technology and the scientific, kind of stuff going on at the time.
I mean, also, the Washington Department of Health says it can find no record of what happened to the samples it received.
Oh, wow. No, that's not a surprise. Just like Danny Casolaro in his papers. Yeah, sorry I keep referencing other cases, people, if you're new to this episode, but you go back and listen to all the other episodes, you'll get cop speed pretty quickly. Unless I decide to pull a random segment out of my ass that we haven't even talked about, then you're fucked. But, this is a free podcast, so what do you want from me? So, yeah, that's scary, the idea of something like that just coming out of the sky and it's gelatinous. I mean, knowing me, I would probably play with the stuff. I'd probably rub it in my hands and be like, wow. Wow, this is neat. And I'd probably taste it to see if it had any flavor. Because I do
great.
I do stupid shit
taste like that. Taste it, then I wouldn't be talking to you right now.
Yeah, I'd probably be dead. Sure. Probably be dead. But so that's that one. That's the Blob.
I thought you'd be smarter than that.
No, as a kid,
because you're all paranoid about stuff after watching Unsolved Mysteries. That's why I thought you would be smarter than that and not all this weird substance. It wouldn't be playing around with
No,
it.
Mike, I'm paranoid of ghosts and UFOs, okay? When it comes to, like, actual threats like guns and strangers and tasting globs from the sky, that I'll do. It's stuff like UFOs and ghosts that I'm truly cautious
the
of.
globs from the sky could have came from a UFO.
Well, if I saw it come from UFO, I wouldn't taste it, but until I saw it, I would just assume it's like the new clear...
You got your Jello craving.
Yeah, it's a new Jello campaign to like give people a taste of their new clear Jello. So maybe that's what it would have been as I would have thought as a kid and maybe as an adult. Moving on, our next segment is 2 Mary murders. This one was also a request, but again, one that I also want to talk about at some point.
This one, for me personally, it is kind of interesting, but at the same time, I don't know. There's other bizarre murder cases I thought were more, fascinating to me. But
there's a few things that I really wanted to mention on this, and that was kind of it. And I'll get to those. There's one particular. The person I hate the most in the history of Unsolved Mysteries is in this segment, and so that's kind of one of the reasons I want to talk about it. Houston, Texas. Very early one October morning, Jay Morris was walking his wife to her car for her to go to work. Mary Morris was a 48-year-old successful bank loan officer. Later, though, Jay became concerned because she wasn't answering her phone. So Jay called Mary's supervisor and found out that she wasn't at work. And then he knew something was wrong because she never missed work. Meanwhile, a passerby on some four-wheeler many miles away discovered a smoldering car with a burned body inside, seared beyond recognition. By that time, Jay started to think the worst, so when he heard about the burned car, he picked up his stepdaughter, Jeannie Blaylock, I believe, or Marilyn Blaylock or something, and they checked out the car. When they drove to the scene, police were there, and they told him to turn around and go home, which is what police always do. Marilyn. Okay.
Marilyn Blaylock.
Marilyn Blaylock. I like that last name, Blaylock. It's kind of fun to say. So the police told him to go away from the smoldering car or whatever. He's thinking it wasn't her though. He saw the car, and even though she was missing, he's like, yeah, there's no way that this is my wife. Understandable. You're in that kind of denial part. You don't want to think the worst. After a few hours though, detectives delivered the bad news. It was Mary in the car. The crime was so brutal that police did not suspect it was robbery, but soon every other avenue turned into a dead end. Quote, there was no reason for it. She was a good person. That's what her stepdaughter, Marilyn, had to say. Mm-hmm. And, they would ask, gambling, drugs, affairs, and it was all no. She didn't do any of that stuff. She didn't even drink. She didn't do any of that. So a few days after that case, the strange twist happened. 3 days later, not far from where the first Mary's body was found, a second body was found too. She was also killed in her car, and her name was also Mary Morris. The 2 Marys also bore a certain resemblance, both physically and kind of like...
It sounds like somebody was a fan of the Terminator. Where the Terminator goes around, looks for Sarah Connor.
Oh, yeah, all the different Sarah
for
Connors.
all these different Sarah Connors, so like... Are you Sarah Connor?
So
are you Mary Morris?
Mary Morris. Police had to piece together the evidence of the second murder to try to find a possible link to the first murder. Murder. God, get it? Moida, I tell you, is a moida. Mary McGinnis Morris, the second Mary that was...
Roger Rabbit made a cameo here on our podcast.
Mary McGinnis Morris, the second Mary that was murdered, was 39 years old, and like Mary Lou Morris, the first one who was murdered, she was also a successful professional with a sunny disposition. Oh, well, I hate women with sunny dispositions. I'm gonna kill them, and especially ones that are named Mary. That's kind of a weird. That's kind of a weird MO.
Mr. T.
That was a combination of Mr. T and like bad Yosemite Sam. This is bad impersonation hour, okay? Just it's a Mucinex. I don't know.
I pity Mary Morris.
I pity you if your name is Mary Morris. So her sister, Mary McGinnis Morris, her sister was quoted by saying Mary was always happy. She was like an angel. So obviously the second Mary was a saint as well. Mary was a nurse practitioner. She was dedicated and excelled at her job. You know, it was not very uncommon to see her working 14-hour days and then get called in and come in the next day and do it all over again. Mary got along with her staff, but according to her staff, one new employee, a male nurse, was a poor fit right from the start. The relationship quickly went from bad to worse. Mary increasingly became nervous and distraught. According to her friend Lori, quote, "She told me she was afraid of this person. I asked, 'Do you really think he could hurt you?' And she said yes, and way worse."
The actor who played this guy,
he was the perfect, like, menacing white dude, like, just...
Well, I mean, I didn't think menacing. I just thought it was kind of just stalkerish schlub of a man.
Yeah, schlub is a perfect descriptor.
Like a fatter Robin Williams. Or like a balding, fatter Robin Williams is what he kind of reminded me of. Like if Robin Williams was like some loser, crazy stalker.
All I know is at that time in Hollywood in the casting agency, that particular actor had the lock on any pedophile, creep, stalker, pervert that was needed in any movie or show. That guy had a lot of work that year.
Yeah.
Sure
did.
But yeah, this guy, you know, she was saying, you know, I feel like he could hurt me and do way worse. Now that's something people normally don't say. No. I mean, have you ever talked to anybody in your life where it's one thing to be kind of afraid of somebody or concerned.
I've had death threats on YouTube, but it's just very bullshit, you know, people being fucking dumb.
Yeah,
but because the internet is just the anonymity, you know, enables people to say stupid shit that they never even remotely consider thinking about saying in public or in front of your face.
Yeah, well, I'm talking like real life. Like I couldn't imagine talking to somebody I know and them going, "Oh, I feel like he could hurt me and way worse." I'd be like, dude, if you feel like that, you need to call the authorities.
Exactly. Yeah, I haven't felt like that either.
So a few days later, Mary went to her office to pick up some papers and made a disturbing discovery. She found things out of place on her desk. The pictures were turned to face the wrong direction. And then on the coworker's desk, it said the words "death to her."
Yeah, and of course she assumed it was her, which makes sense. I mean, who else would it be? And apparently this guy was trying to discredit her like multiple times and eventually was fired. So,
which, you know, probably made him harbor even more resentment towards this person, which this guy, you know...
Prime suspect number one to me is this guy.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually quite a few shows I've seen, especially like back when we had cable and I'd watch Investigation Discovery, where there's these medical, like, you know, kind of like murder kind of things. And it seems like in the medical field, there was a lot of cases where like there'd be this coworker that would get obsessed with one of the females who also worked there and would, you know, just start doing this crazy shit. So I don't know if there's something about the medical field that makes people snap because of the workload or something like that, but this is definitely precedented before this happened. So now I want to get into my most hated person on Unsolved Mysteries. It's her fucking husband, Mary McGinnis Morris's husband.
Yeah.
This round-faced fucking dumb...
Mike Morris, yeah.
Dumb cunt douchebag. I mean, he's just got the face that you want to slap. You just want to slap his stupid face, and he's so aloof, and he's so just good old boy, got this little southern accent going on, and I just don't know what happened. I didn't know if the meds could... Yeah, we'll get into all the shit that he says, but I fucking hate this guy. I don't know why. I
don't hate him as much as you. I mean...
If you've ever seen somebody... I don't know, man. If you've ever seen somebody where you just dislike them because of their face, it's like, I don't like your face, motherfucker.
I didn't feel that way about this guy.
I did for some reason.
I felt that way about the creeper schlub of, you know...
He didn't bother me as much as this husband guy did. I don't know, man. I might have some deep down resentment towards like Southern culture.
Rednecks or something.
Yeah, because I grew up here.
Or something. So
yeah, there might be some deep seated hatred I have towards like people like this guy because he reminds me of every baseball coach like I've ever had in my life, or every like basketball coach, just some fat good old boy who just I'm just ain't hurting nobody.
More of a Texan accent.
Well, they're all good old boys to me. It's all the Bible Belt, as far as I'm concerned. That's the way I live, Mike. You gotta get used to it. Hee-wee! I can smell a pig from a mile away. I hate it. I'm shuddering.
Do they do the pig call contest?
See-wee! I don't know what the fuck they do. I stay the fuck away from all those people down here. There's actually this bar right down the road from my house called The Roost, and that's a watering hole for all the good old boys. Ain't doing no one harm, just hanging out. And I had to fill in. My friend who's a DJ had me fill in there one time. And oh my god, it was horrible.
It was asking you to do the Garth Brooks song all the time, right?
Oh, they wanted to hear nothing but country, and it was just the most like.
I got friends in low places.
Well, that was a must. I mean, that was a must. That's a must anywhere though down here. Even if you're not a good old boy, you still
get. It's crazy. Like I thought, Jacksonville's not what I would consider a hick town. So that's Dude, there are certain parts that aren't, but like for the most part, it is. Like when I did that Sweet 16 birthday party, it was at the grandfather's house, and he was a judge, and he lived in this mansion. And even still, with like this living in this mansion with like all this fanciness around him, he still had either like his like I guess his son who was of adult age because like the grandfather was older. His son, like as they're walking down this mansion, he goes to me, "Hey, you gonna play any country?" I'm like, fuck off, dude. I can't escape this shit anywhere. I can't even escape this in some nice, like, mansion-y kind of environment. I still got good old boys. Yeah, we might be rich, but we still like to listen to country songs. Hey, we're getting so off topic here. I'm just going to cut myself off. It's surprising, though. It's surprising to me.
Dude, I could just go on about that, but I'm not going to.
I guess there's a bunch of transplants from Kentucky or Alabama or something over there.
No, they're all homegrown, just from Jacksonville my whole life. Just live here. And from Georgia, some people from Georgia, and then some people from Palatka,
Georgia,
Yulee.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Any fucking hoozles. So they show the husband, and I don't like him.
I don't like your face.
I don't like your face, buddy. And he was saying that Mary, his wife, asked if he could provide a gun. Well, I got to do it in his accent every time I call him. He asked if I could provide a gun for her protection. And she asked me to place the gun under her car seat, which I did. Mary met with her friend Lori to give her an allergy shot. This is back up at the clinic. They chit-chatted for a bit, kind of like me and Mike do, where we annoy everybody. And she was only going to stay there for a couple hours. That's what she was telling Lori, because, Lori was concerned with the, coworker and everything. And, she's like, yeah, I'm just going to stay for a couple hours. Then Lori received an alarming call from Mary a little while later, and she said that she saw someone in the drugstore that gave her the creeps. Now, she didn't say who, she just said someone. Wasn't even the coworker. That's what makes it even more mysterious. That kind of ties in with the whole hitman theory that's coming up here. And she said, I'm just going to run across the bridge and turn my computer off and sign out of the building and, go home. Police aren't sure what happened after that, but 12 minutes later, after saying goodbye to Lori, Mary made a frantic phone call to 911. Quote, "We're not releasing the content of that tape at this time. It covers the attack that happened to Mary, and anybody that's ever heard this tape has just had their blood chilled listening to it. It's a very chilling, disturbing call." Now, this is an investigator who's saying this. He's saying, he's not some, like, private citizen. He's like, this is a guy who works, and sees this stuff all the time, and he's saying that we're not releasing the content of the tape.
That must be one really fucked up phone call.
Yeah, to say the least. Kind of makes me want to hear it. But
I don't. I really don't.
Well, actually, no, I don't. Especially knowing that it's real and not a movie. I take that back. I don't want to hear it. Got enough shit in my head already. The details of
Although sometimes Unsolved Mysteries did play calls like that.
Right, well, that's what makes it so much weirder that they didn't do it this time. Well, not weirder, but so much, that it must have been fucked up that they normally do play that stuff, and this time they didn't. So the details of Mary's abduction are unclear. However, the medical examiner's report revealed that she was viciously beaten and shot in the head.
And visually beaten because the guy looked at her.
Well, yeah, so I mean, I didn't mess up in what I said there. The investigation first led to the coworker, obviously at the clinic. He allegedly had left on bad terms. He left after several failed attempts to discredit Mary, as you were saying earlier. He remains a suspect. Authorities had also had questions for Fatty McFucking Southern Face, Mike Morris. He said he was at the movies with his daughter at the time. Detectives had concerns about his alibi. According to police, Morris stonewalled the investigation through his own actions and not allowing his daughter to be questioned.
Yeah, the police are like, Mike refused to meet with them without an attorney. And he's like, witnesses don't need attorneys. Suspects generally have attorneys.
Right, which is true. But then, according to Mike, I was just following the advice of several friends. Several of these people suggested that I take an attorney with me. Not that I have anything to hide, but someone that would be with me that would be familiar with the procedures. But investigators also point to his refusal to take a polygraph test. Again, he has a response to that. I was on anti-anxiety and antidepressants at the time. I was unsure that this polygraph examination could adequately compensate for those conditions.
First off, isn't there some way to do research to figure out what the effects of antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications might have? Oh, this is before the internet, so.
Well, I mean, also, again, if you don't have anything...
That'd probably be harder.
If you have nothing to hide, then why are you so nervous,
Yeah.
Friends also say Mike and Mary were having marital problems at the time. When Mike learned that Mary might have been having an affair with a family friend, Mike confronted the two head-on. They both looked at me in the eye and told me that there had been nothing inappropriate in their relationship, and I didn't see any betrayal in their eyes. Which to me sounds like a Conway Twitty song. I didn't see betrayal in their eyes. I just... Oh! You sound like Hank Hill right now. Oh! So then the motive that they went to next was follow the money. A life insurance policy that would have paid out $700,000 to Mike, because he was the beneficiary, in the event of Mary's murder, or death, I should say, not murder, was found out by police. Police consider... This is the other thing that really stands out to me in this particular case. The phone call. Yeah, police consider the most curious part of the Mike's guilt was the call he made to Mary's cell phone around the time police believe she was murdered. There was...
After she was murdered, actually, I think. Was it after?
I wrote that it was after, but I'm wondering if it was before.
Because they went in... Here's the actual thing. The most curious evidence against Mike Morris was a call he made to Mary's cell phone 2 hours after Mary had made her desperate call to 911.
Okay, so I got it from here. That's all I needed. Yeah, so phone call made right after the attack. Now, that phone call was... Well, not right after the attack, 2 hours after the attack. The phone call was made by Mike Morris, Fatty McStupidface. The phone call lasted a total of 4 minutes. Now, this was by all intents and purposes a completed phone call as far as the phone company was concerned. What you have to wonder is, according to one of the investigators, what did that phone call either set in motion or end? Now, quoting...
And then, Mike Morris, you can go
Fatty McStupidface. Normally, the cellular service would have kicked in and said the party you were calling was unavailable. I didn't get that. I don't know why. As long as the phone was ringing and I thought there was a possibility she'd answer, I let it ring. Police don't accept that because it showed up on the phone bill. Question is...
he's like, I don't accept that Mike made this phone call and the phone rang for 4 minutes. It's not possible. The question is, who answered the phone on the other end? That's what the big question is.
Right.
And what did they talk about for 4 minutes?
And then Fatty McStupidface. I had absolutely nothing to do with the arranged man Mary's murder. It's a hurtful insinuation. Despite Mike's denial, police have not eliminated him as a suspect, nor should they.
Yeah, Mike was all like, "It's absolutely untrue."
One of the theories is speculated that an inept contract killer botched the hit meant for the second Mary Morris and killed the...
That's honestly what I think happened.
That's pretty clear. That's what happened.
Exactly what happened. That's what's the thing. I mean, it's interesting, the stuff with Fatty McStupidface and the phone call and, you know, the whole novelty, the fact that, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but, you know, the whole thing where it's like two Marys were murdered or hit at the same time. But that's as far as it goes when it comes to as interesting as this case is for me, because I think it's just open and shut. I don't think there's anything unsolved here. The only thing unsolved is we haven't found the hitman.
Well, right, and, you know, it goes further into that by saying it was bolstered by the fact that the wedding ring of the first Mary Morris was missing, and that's usually an indicator to whoever hired the killer that the job has been done successfully. They give him the wedding ring or some kind of personal effect that...
They were both found in a car.
Yeah. All the detectives have to say about that is that, well, the remoteness of the location, destroying of the evidence, yeah, that does speak to a contract killing, but with the background of the victim, it doesn't seem likely, and there's no evidence that supports that. How? I
don't buy that.
How is there no evidence that?
And then they say things like, well, you know, his backstory, you know, the people, you know, the first Mary, like there wasn't anybody that they know of that would want her dead. Well, of course, if it's a mistaken hit, there is no motive. It's just a mistake.
Right, and they said there's no evidence to support that that it was a mistaken hit, but they just got done telling us that it was a fucking life insurance policy that was almost $1 million that would have gotten paid out to the husband in the event that the wife died. And
with Mike Morris, not with the other.
Right, with the second Morris husband or whatever. And then on top of that, there was you know, talk that maybe she was having an affair and this, that, and the other. So it was like, you know, he's pissed off at his wife or has secret resentments. He's taken antidepressants, anti-anxieties. He's obviously emotionally unstable to some extent. And he knows he's going to get $700K if he bumps her off or if someone else does it. So, I mean, yeah, it is, in my opinion, an open and shut case. Still an interesting case nonetheless. Still a very enjoyable.
Yeah, the first Mary Morris's her friend, you know, she says it best. She's like, I can't help but think that they have to be related. I can't imagine that two women with the same name would be murdered within 3 days of each other, both found in their cars, and not have that be related.
Yeah, detectives continued their search, but came up empty to link the two murders together. They kept wanting to link them together, but then after, you know, nearly 300 homicides in Harris County that year, the murders were just seen as a bizarre coincidence. The family believes it's bullshit, though, as you mentioned. So, yeah. You know,
it's a good case. It's definitely a good watch. It's just there's all these other bizarre murders. Like it's just something. There's something extra with those that just, you know, that just stuck with me a bit more. This one, because it was just like, I don't know who did it. Like, I haven't found the guy.
Well,
I mean...
And if Don Dixon gave off, you know, culpability in the first segment... And,
well, the sheriff did to me.
And the sheriff gave off culpability in the first segment. And the guy who said he didn't murder his son, and then it come to find out he did murder his son. If all those guys, you know, kind of vaguely gave off like they were guilty, this guy reeks of guilt, in my opinion. Not only the circumstances surrounding her death, as far as the insurance and the alleged affair, but just also in how he's so worried about everything. He's worried about taking the polygraph. He's worried about, you know, talking to the police just as a witness, so he takes a fucking attorney with him. I mean, it just...
I could kind of see... I mean, there's been cases where people have been wrongfully imprisoned because they don't have an attorney present.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I can kind of see why you'd want an attorney, but I don't see him reeking of guilt to me. I just see him as kind of just being you know, kind of simpleton type guy who just doesn't really have much of a filter, it seems like, maybe, and just says things the way that, you know, he says it like it is.
Maybe he just reeks in general, like stench wise, like he just smells. Like,
I don't hate this guy nearly
like
as much
Depew.
as Josh does, but you know, it's funny though. It's funny.
I don't know. I don't like him. I don't like his face. He's got a very, like I said, he's got a very slappable face. He's got a face you just want. It just looks like it would feel good to just slap his face very hard. Like his cheeks kind of like puff out, like unusually.
You got a problem, man. Really, there's some deep-suited issues, you know, embedded in your brain or something from some like maybe some
Mike, you're just now finding this out. Come on, man. I thought you were quicker than that.
Some kind of deliverance style, you know, moment in your childhood or whatever.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Like
looks like Mike. You know, looks like this Mike Morris guy, you know, Meiji.
Okay. So because he's named Mike, he can't do anything wrong. All Mikes are just above reproach. That's what it all boils down to.
No.
You're in the fucking Mike club over there.
Absolutely not. No.
Uh-huh. I see through your very thinly veiled
What
attempts.
Mikes that are like, there's a lot of people in Unsolved Mysteries are like fucking murderers, and like a guy, was it this Mike? There's a guy named Mike who like went in and like, didn't he like kidnap his girlfriend or something, and then kept her hostage or something, and shot her friend in a car? So no, there's plenty of Mikes out there that are fucking scumbags and assholes. I just don't. There's not enough here with this character to me. I mean, even if I didn't like him, I wouldn't be like, oh, yeah, he reeks of guilt. But hey, that's just my opinion.
Well, I just think with the insurance policy of 700K,
that's something to definitely look into. I can see why he's a suspect, but I don't necessarily say, okay, yeah, he's
well, I'm not saying he's the trigger man.
I wouldn't be necessarily surprised, though, if he did call the hitman and called in the hit. The phone call is the thing that really puzzles me the most. It's not his statements or the way he looks. It's the phone call. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It reeks of guilt. Well, to me, it's just, what's that phone call? That's the thing that really, I'd say if I had to pick who's the number one suspect in this case, it probably would be him.
My next thing is like, what 39-year-old woman has a life insurance policy on them for almost $1 million unless, like, they're incredibly ill, maybe? Or they think they're going to be worse off, or they're going to die in the future.
Not the girl, maybe she put on the insurance policy because she was worried that creepy guy was going to kill her or something.
Maybe. I don't know. That's a really high amount of life insurance.
It is. But yeah, it's the phone call thing. What? I mean,
now back in the day, like, truth be told,
was there a glitch? Is it a glitch in the system? I mean, if it was a glitch in the system, okay. But what? You know,
there have been times when I was younger and I would call my friends from school on their house phone, and sometimes the machine just wouldn't kick in, and the phone would just ring and ring and ring and ring.
4 minutes? I would have hung up after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, but if you're some simpleton like that guy, you know, he's a doop-a-doo, what we maybe she'll answer. Good old boy ain't doing no harm.
4 minutes? I'm like the investigator. I'm like, I don't know if I buy that.
Yeah, no, with that, I'm telling you, I think he's guilty, but, you know, I'm just saying, you know, back in the 90s.
Could be. I'm not going to say I think he is, but I'm going to say he could be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like we're going to get sued or anything for, like, saying this guy murdered this woman. Or maybe we will. I don't fucking know.
He's listening, and then he's all like, you made fun of me.
You made fun of me.
That's slander.
I'm going to get me and my boys together, and we're going to slap your face. How about that? Then I'll,
slap you with a lawsuit.
Yeah. Yeah, buddy. I'll hire that same man to kill you that killed my, what I meant to say, the drugs that I was taking at the time couldn't damn it. Oh, man.
That's the thing, too. If he did I mean, how could he cover this if he was really that much of a simpleton, like how could he really cover this up for so long?
I don't know. I mean, you look at
That's a mystery.
yeah. I mean, you look at some of the other segments on here that have never been solved, and you know, so despite popular belief, you know, despite how TV wants to portray it, there are, you know, a lot of cases that do go unsolved, and people get away with it. I mean, they don't want anybody to know that because they don't want to encourage, you know, hey.
I think I honestly think there's a percentage or something where most of the cases are unsolved. Really,
yeah,
and that kind of makes sense. If you think
a lot
about
of them
it.
are.
I don't think it's a success rate of 50%. I don't even think it's 50-50. It's probably, you know, as messed up as that sounds. I mean, but that's kind of how it is. I mean, think about all the robberies and all the other stuff that doesn't get solved. I mean,
right. There are a lot of open and shut cases though, where it's just kind of like boom, boom, boom. You know.
Yeah.
But these are the.
So maybe there's more open and shut cases than I think. There probably is.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have to say about this case.
All I have to say, my stomach is saying something to me right now, and it's saying, "Feed me, Seymour." So, yeah, this is some interesting segments. We don't really know exactly. Was it the government dropped the blob? I don't know. I think it was. It's just a lot of I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was this person. I think, or it might be this person. It might be this person. It might be the government. Who knows?
But you guys don't listen to this to look for answers.
Exactly. I just hope you guys enjoy the podcast. That's what I think.
I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. So we're on YouTube. Mike is, if you want to see more of us separately, but equal, if you know, Mike's on YouTube, www.youtube.com/OCP Communications. He does movie reviews and all kinds of stuff on there. It's kind of like this podcast almost. He just talks in depth about movies.
I mean, if you like podcasts, I mean, it's the only difference is that I do it in front of a camera, and that's the thing I don't get is like, oh, it's too long or this whatever. And I'm like, if I did this in a podcast form, I don't think I get near as many people like going like complaining or whatever. But it is what it is, and I'm just really passionate about, you know, film, just like I'm passionate about this show. So
right, you know, so you can find him on there. And then
what can I say?
I am not as fancy as Mike, who has his own URL. You cannot look me up by a URL. You just have to type in the search bar on YouTube, either dancing
maybe when you hit 1,000 subs, maybe you'll be able to.
I think 500 is when I get my own.
Well, you're almost there.
Yeah, I'm almost 200 away. Well, actually 197 away. Search Dancing with Ghosts or the Overstimulation Station. That's how you'll find me in my videos. I do a bunch of different shit, video game reviews, taste testing various things, music stuff, like the top 10 songs that you can only find on movie soundtracks, or are game sequels always better, or is he the most overrated video game character? Stuff like that. So, and we also have a Facebook page, which a lot of you have been interacting with, which is awesome. It's
Facebook.com/uncovering unexplained mysteries. Isn't it weird that I had to do it in this robot voice because I was too lazy to record another voice over?